Mr. Chairman and the board, Tom Dawson. I've taught parenting classes over the years, and I find that the children will do well if parents deal with their issues. As I read the introduction of the Bill of Rights, it's really a list of goals and aspirations, as Mr. Crocker said. This is nothing more than a limited list of goals for every middle-class family in America, and much has been left out. Family is a spiritual and legal institution that has the responsibility for their children, not the collective or the community. Many people have indeed organized to bring enrichment programs to their children, such as symphony, sports programs, recreation programs, art programs, etc. However, the problem comes when low-wage earners can't find work to support enrichment for their family activities due to a hostile and exceedingly regulated economic environment. Although the government boards claim to promote business, the fees and levies continue to rise, whereas other states actually provide land, buildings, and several years of tax breaks to entice businesses to a friendly economic environment. Our state and county does nothing of the kind. When per capita income goes up, education and quality of life goes up. It's called achieving the American dream. If you want to endorse something, endorse lowering taxes and fees and on businesses and new home starts. Minimize smart growth doctrine, and like Kern County, develop a planning department which is easy to work with, not one where every project is a never-ending adventure. People can raise their own children, run their own lives. The idea of a Bill of Rights for all people has already been recorded, and those were given by God, not failed human organizations. I'm glad to see people working with children, but as a policy driver, we have fought this battle several years ago as the United Nations Child Bill of Rights. The U.S. Senate wouldn't ratify or endorse these policies. If you want to endorse this change, change the name to Children's List of Aspirations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. Laura Mordaunt, followed by Mike Brown.
Yes, I agree with the two previous speakers. In fact, what they had to say was probably in a different tone that I always take, as you know. So the Bill of Rights, I agree. It needs to be an aspiration. It needs to be a goal. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're going to affect legislation, rules and regulations, the strategic plan, that is a taking from all the citizens. You see, we already have parents in place. We need to provide jobs and capability for head of household to be to support their families. It's not the collective, the government, to take over the raising of children. That's a taking. And I would say no to this as a resolution. As goals for children, absolutely. I've been a teacher. I tutor in this county. I work with children. Absolutely. But not. The government is not our parents. And we need to stop that. We need to be not endorsing laws and demands, because then we're going to have to stack and pack you, put you in walkable communities, and then they'll be safe if there is enough surveillance. So that is the concern I have, is that this is another end run into an endorsement based on using the term children. That is unfair. If you want to help children, help them. But do not incarcerate the rest of our society with additional laws. Laws are the concern I have, because that is what you asked for, Mr. Superintendent of Schools. You asked that these be translated into laws. Did you hear that comment? That concerns me. We have enough laws on the books. We just need to do our best to have the ability for families to earn an income in this county. Change that, and you will change the lives of children for the better.
Thank you, Ms. Mordaunt. Mike Brown's my final request to speak on this item.
You want to reset the clock, please? I won't cheat. Mike Brown, representing CoLab. We'd again ask that the PowerPoints be included in the agenda materials that are put up on the web. Clearly, this PowerPoint was ready, as one of the speakers pointed out. It's been used several times in the past, so it wasn't a problem to do it logistically. Quite frequently we see these aspiration or goal statements either pertaining to children and youth or the aging or the homeless or some other group where very nice things are said ought to be the aspiration of some city or county or even the state. And the question is, how do they get translated into real policy? If this is important, which it does seem to be important, how do you, as policymakers, convert it into tangible, hard goals that perhaps displace other policies, which I realize is difficult, counties being a catch-all and a administrative subdivision of the state. But given things like housing, which is critical, where you live, how you live, has everything to do about your chances and success in life, who your associates are, where you go to school, how safe you are. What could you do to promote housing that meets some of these goals? For example, intergenerational housing with a granny unit, or out on the farms, maybe more than the second unit that the bulk of the ordinance now controls. What about a policy that promotes intergenerational families? What about the entitlement process? Would you give a break to housing proposals that do provide housing for intergenerational housing, so grandma or auntie or whoever can be there on site and help out? And then the big picture, what would you do for the economy? There's a lot of wahoo this morning about the future of San Simeon, an attraction that apparently doesn't cover its costs. Well, what about a Hyatt Regency somewhere that would help service that and enhance the attraction and provide a throw-off to make that attraction work and maybe employ 1,100 people with a career, with a pension that the Hyatt Corporation provides?
Thank you, Mr. Brown. That concludes my request to speak this morning. I'll bring it back to the board for action. Questions?
I do have a question.
Mr. Meacham?
Maybe I can ask either Dr. Crocker or Susan Hughes, if I could, please. How would you see these to become enforceable actions? You have talked about the next steps and actions. Do you deem these to be somewhat designated to be enforceable actions of some sort, or are these, as you mentioned, Dr. Crocker, goals and aspirations, which I completely agree with, but I'm just curious about that part of it.
Sure. It's the latter. It's a statement of values and goals and aspirations, and periodically, whether it's this board or school boards or commissions, would be dealing with particular issues regarding children and youth, and as those issues come forward, reference could be made to this as opposed to some set legislative agenda.
Okay. And I'm trying to determine what the difference between this and the Bill of Rights that we enjoy. Children enjoy those same Bill of Rights, do they not?
They do. I think this is focused primarily on our youngest citizens, and the attempt here is to really call out the importance of our youngest children, and obviously we hope everybody believes that. And sometimes children need advocates as adults, and it would be wonderful if all families were intact and they were their own advocates, but I think the feeling of the Commission is, particularly in the realms of health and education, that we have a responsibility as adults to be advocates for all of our children.
Thank you.
Supervisor.